Welcome, welcome. I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation. Um, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all those who celebrate this amazing time at the end of the year. And whatever your desire and affiliation or religious uh, way, if you will, congratulations to you too, and celebrations for all of that. And this is really an interesting time, and I want to thank Sedona for being part of this today. This is wrapping up the end of 2017, an interesting year for me, to say the least. And I'm sure it's been pretty awesome and amazing for you too, Sedona. So thank you for being part of this. So today is about following your dream. And this is a great time to actually start to think about it rather than on Sunday night and realizing what you haven't done and realizing or deciding what you think you might do for 2018. So putting it all in perspective is going to be interesting because I'm the generation of the baby boomer, and I was just talking to Sedona right before the show, and she's the Generation Z, whatever that means. I have no clue what that means. Still a little confused about the millennials. I'm kind of critical about the millennials too, but then I began to understand them, and really it's no one's fault what generation you're born in. You're just adopting many of the attributes simply because of all the social dynamics. You're going to say something, Sedona.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that people talk about how past generations have don't mix well with millennials or fight with them, and I think it's funny because that happens to pretty much every generation, and I think people are just starting to become like aware and conscious of it now, but it's not a new thing.
Right, exactly. So I've got a small technical thing that I need to take care of right now, but somehow it's not letting me do this. I need to make sure that we are recording the show, and Blue Jeans is not letting me get in there. Hold on one second whilst I fix this and making sure that I can. Oh boy. Um, oh well, it's not going to let me do this right now. So, oh, here we go. Hold on one second. I apologize for this. Say something right now, Sedona, so that we can keep this thing going on.
Yeah, I definitely think even I get confused about which generation people fall under. A lot of people have different opinions of it, but um, what I've been told for a long time is that I actually don't fall into the millennial time group. That stops, I think, about like the late 80s or really early 90s, and I was born in the late 90s. So I'm the start of a new generation, if you will.
All right. So for whatever reason, I am not able to record today, so I'll just get it from you guys. All right. So it's about following your dreams, and the key thing here is that yes, we are a product of the generation that we come into, and it's interesting, how our lives then become manifest as a result of the environment that we grow up in. And so when I look at my own father and had a dramatic impact on my life because of something that he did and that is he gave up on his dreams. And he was born in the 1920s, grew up in Europe during the Second World War, was part of the Dutch resistance. And a time of life that he never talked to us about because it was horrific in many, many different ways. And it's interesting how, as a result of that, his determination to be really successful in life and became a very successful businessman and had three great kids, great spouse, and frankly gave up quite a lot of the enjoyment that he could have had outside of his career. So he was extremely successful in business, internationally, traveling 6 months out of the year, barely connecting with his own children and his own wife. But he had a plan. He had a dream. And his dream was to retire early, which he did. He retired at the age of 55. And within about a year or two of his retirement, and the plan was that he was going to enjoy life. He was going to connect with his children, with his family. He was going to travel the world. We had a house in England. We had a house in Spain. And he was going to have the time of his life, because then he could do all the things that he wanted to do. He wanted to have a sailing boat too. I forget what it was, but it's about a 32-footer. So anyhow, what happens, unfortunately, my mother was involved in a very serious car accident. She was unconscious for 6 months, in the hospital for about 2 years. And so his whole life changed. And so he then dedicated the remaining of his life, another 10 years, to taking care of my mom, and really gave up on a lot of things. And so the question that I have, for people out there is, what are you giving up? What are you settling right now for? Whether it's relationships, whether it's experiences, whether it's, building a business and not doing it because you're fearing failure, which likely will happen in most cases. But the fact is, at least you will have tried. And so what dreams are people giving up today? What are they settling for? Why are they settling? Why is this happening? And at one point in your life, are you going to make that decision to say, you know what, I'm going to go after my dreams? And it's interesting how different generations approach it in a different way. But today's about you right now listening in, if you've lost track of that dream. And what can we do about it? Another story, which is really interesting, because through my coaching, I meet people. And it's interesting to see how people have had an incredible career in business. And one comes to mind. She was a senior executive with one of the major banks, and highly successful. And at the age of about 55, she just quit. Totally made a complete, 180 shift, and became a shaman. And that was her dream. That was the love that she had missed out on in her life for so long. And I hear the story over and over again. People that are attorneys that thought this is the best thing that they could do, and they become artists. And so the key here is, what are the dreams that you might be giving up? And they could be small dreams. How do we get these dreams? So have you given up on any dreams, Sedona?
Not so far. I really, I think that sometimes you kind of think something is your dream, and then something comes along in life and you realize that it wasn't quite the direction that you wanted to go in. When I was really young, I thought I wanted to be a professional dancer, and I thought I wanted to own a studio. And then once I started kind of working in that realm and did a couple things, I realized it was really fun, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So, but I wouldn't consider it giving up on a dream. I think my dream changed.
And that happens too. And so obviously there's no regrets there that you haven't done that, because you've replaced it with something better, and that simply came from a new awareness. I had the same thing. At the age of 13, I was living in Mexico, amazing lifestyle over there, and my parents had the fortitude and the sense to have me do what they call an aptitude test. I don't know if people are doing that anymore, but it was an interesting. Did you do one of those?
Yeah, we had a couple different versions of them, and they still
Uh-huh.
do them in our schools. They kind of
Hmm.
start us that really young, about fifth or sixth grade. They start doing things like that.
Okay. All right. I still think that might be a little too young,
Yeah.
because I don't think you've really matured enough to really understand what life is all about, and what your real interests are, what your real strengths are. So what came out for me was to be either a vet or a doctor. And so I actually picked being a doctor because I really enjoyed that part. I enjoyed the human connection. So much so that my aspiration was to be a pediatrician. I loved being a kid. I was a kid at heart. They used to call me Dennis the Menace because I was the instigator and causing all sorts of problems. I still do that. And the truth was that when I went to train in Europe, And we start, our internships a lot sooner than they do here in the United States. And my first internship was so exciting for me. I was looking forward to it, forever. And it was the pediatric ward. Within about 4 hours, I decided that I could never be a pediatrician because I was so horrified by all the illnesses and how these kids were suffering, and I just couldn't stand it. And so the kid inside of me kind of died, with that. So I definitely changed into something entirely different, and I'm very grateful for that. So, but here's a question that I started pondering, and through all this coaching and understanding that life can be so much grander and better than it is for any of us right now, for most of us at least. And that doesn't mean that we're not happy with what we have. We just know that there's so much more available to us. And if we recognize that we're responsible for getting that, then we have that opportunity to do something about it. And so many people don't, either because they don't believe that they can do it, or they don't believe that it's their responsibility, or kind of sometimes, like in my case, I don't want to work that hard. I've worked hard enough so already. So, but there's many different reasons why people don't go after their dreams. And I started thinking about this, and what's the real problem? Because when you think about it, let's start off. When you're born, and you're really free to do anything. There's no restrictions in your life. I mean, everybody just accepts you being that baby, being the toddler, and you're cute and everything else. And there comes a moment where probably as a child you realize, look, I can't stand, everybody else is standing. And then suddenly you can stand. And now suddenly, as a baby, as a toddler, you have a completely different vision of life. And then after that, there comes a time where you see all these people, on their tricycles or bikes. And suddenly now you got wheels, and your whole world then expands. First when you stand up and walk, and now you can move more quickly on a tricycle. And what that really means is that we begin to learn, we begin to get wired that there is so much more out there. We can start dreaming about more things, grander things, bigger things. And as a child, you don't have that many limitations because you just go out and dream. Everything is possible. We go through this development through childhood where, as dreamers, we have the sense of omnipotence and that anything is possible. We can do anything. And that's a great feeling until typically we go to school, and then we're told we can't. And interesting enough, that's when things change dramatically. They change because other people begin to control your life, what you can and what you can't do. And so you develop all these stories about limitations about self. And so I think what happens is that there's this unconscious conversation going inside a lot of us that says you can't do it. I was reflecting the other day as I'm asking myself, I'm a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. I've been doing this for 20 years, and people look at me and say, oh my gosh, you're so successful. And I consider that what I've achieved just the beginning. I'm nowhere close to where I know my potential can lead me to and what the world has to offer me. And sometimes I'm wondering, why have I not done all the things that I've wanted to do? And the same story for other people. Why haven't other people done, what they know or they want, they can do? And it comes down to the stories that we tell ourselves, the limitations, the backstories from our mentors, our teachers that tell us what you can and cannot do. I remember one of my teachers, his name is Mendelssohn, and he said, without any hesitation, he says, don't be a doctor. You'll never be good at it. And so, interesting enough, people have these perceptions of us, including perceptions of generations. Like I had perceptions of the millennials. I thought they were pretty useless. And if we don't understand what's really going on with that person, with that child, what's their strength, what's their magic, what's their flow, we risked the chance of really disempowering them. And I felt, disempowered by some of the things that, my father did. And I thought to myself the other day, my father was a great guy. I mean, he loved me, and he was a hard worker, and he was a great provider, and he was a really decent man. But I didn't meet his standards. And it didn't matter that I came from a different generation, because he didn't understand that difference. He just felt that, he was, from the great generation, and therefore, I needed to be like him. But I wasn't. I was a baby boomer. I was that free thinker, different perspectives. And so I realized that many times I disappointed my dad, even though I was very successful. I think he was actually surprised that I finished medicine. It's kind of interesting. He was so elated at my graduation. I don't think he ever thought I was going to finish it. Partly because I was partying a lot during medical school, and doing all sorts of other interesting things. During medical school, I probably went, and I hope my professors aren't listening in on this one, but I went to less than 20% of my classes. And those were the ones that were mandatory. If I didn't do those, I wouldn't pass. Everything else I just skipped, because I was so engrossed and involved in expanding myself, becoming that person that I wanted to be, and not being restricted by so much that was around me. And so that's what I like about you so much, Sedona, is that you've got these dreams, and you're one of those young individuals out there that's going for them. And so my question for you, what is it that hasn't stopped you? It's a different question. What is it that hasn't stopped you, that's allowing you to go after with such vigor, such determination, such ambition, your own dreams right now?
I think that one thing that I find a lot is that I've realized there's so many things that people don't know exist. There's so many jobs that people create, and they always are telling us that, like, by the time you graduate college or by the time you graduate high school and go into the workforce, whatever your path is, that you could be doing a job that you prepared for by learning other things, but that you could have never like imagined was going to happen by the time you graduated. And something that I realized is that there is no age limit on certain things. You don't have to have the highest degree. You don't have to do all of these things, even though that's something that I want to do. I want to go to grad school and get my MBA and things. But it all just helps, whether you're learning from school or you're learning from work experience or you're learning from your parents or anybody in your life, you're still learning. It's all still valuable. And that's something that I learned, is that it doesn't have to be so institutionalized, but at the same time, those are really great tools that are pretty much just handed to a lot of people. And especially like public education, it gets knocked down a lot, but it's something that's handed to you. You pay taxes into it, and education's really what you make it. So if you decide not to do something with it, then there's really nobody to blame but yourself. People go into great honorable universities from public school. You don't have to pay tons of money to go into private school just to get that education. You can find it other ways.
It's interesting talking about education, and I find that of all the things that any government can do in any country, education is the one that gets the least attention. And it's interesting because I've had so many conversations over the years with tremendously smart intellectuals and thought leaders who all understand the value of education. I was very fortunate that I had a great education, not just in school, but outside of school, from my parents and all the experiences that I had. And when you think about it, if we look at all the challenges and problems and social issues that we have today, if only we had proper education, the world will be completely different. And it's interesting, particularly in the political arena. And again, I just want to emphasize this is not a political platform, but there's so much dissonance and so much deception, if you will. And I claim myself as being an ignorant. And it's tough, having any kind of political conversation with anyone because of the lack of proper and factual information of what's really going on. And so if we had more of that, if we really understood the important things, and I do question sometimes, the intentions and the agendas of many of the educational platforms in this country and other countries as well, is so, what's your purpose? What is your intention? What is your outcome? I think one of the best educational systems in the world is probably Holland. And it's very well structured and very much so in alignment with, people's potential. And it really should be about a person's potential, helping them be the best that they can be by giving them the tools and the resources and the insights so that they can be the best that they can be. And I think what happens very often is that we are being told, number one, what we have to learn to pass an exam. And then we're also being told what we need to learn so that we can be better when, in fact, whatever it is that we're learning is something that just doesn't naturally align with ourselves. And if you really want to think about it, is the people that have excelled are the people that have found their flow, found their natural genius, and followed that genius and excelled at that genius. And frankly, were pretty bad or pathetic in other areas of life, maybe mathematics or something else. But the point of the matter is that they excelled in one particular area. And you look at people like Einstein and Thomas Edison and Henry Ford, and Gates. They all, didn't finish school or didn't finish college. There's an interesting story on Thomas Edison. I don't know if you've heard this one. So Thomas Edison came home one day, and I forget what age he was. I believe he was maybe 8 or 9. And he had a letter and gave the letter to his mom. And he wasn't reading at that time, or decided not to read the actual letter. And so he asked his mom, what's in the letter? What's the teacher telling me? He says, oh, well, the letter says that you are so brilliant and so incredibly smart that our classroom and our abilities cannot match what your needs are. And so we're going to have to let you go, and you're going to have to be homeschooled. It was interesting, after his mom died, and I think he was in his 30s, he found that letter. And you know what the letter said?
Nothing of the sort.
He said, the letter was from the teacher. It says, your son is so dumb. He's unable to comprehend anything, and he's a distraction to the class, and we cannot support his needs in this class. Something to that effect. And so it's interesting how our environment begins to dictate what kind of person we then become in life. And that's relevant because it also comes down to our dreams. Why do we give up on these dreams? Why is it that we settle for something that we know that it's not right for us? And so I'm going to ask you a question just to put you on the spot. It's kind of unfair because I already know the answer. So why do you think people give up on their dreams? What do you think is going on?
Some of it, I think, is intimidation. I think there's a plus and minus to not knowing what's out in the world, because on the one hand, you get to create things, but on the other hand, it becomes a little bit overwhelming. That's one thing that I've seen people say from time to time, is that they have a really good idea, but there's so much to do. There's so many ways to go about it, and they just don't want to sort through it and find it. And the other one that I hear a lot is that they don't, kind of along the line of they're afraid of failure, but that they just think that if they start that idea, it's not going to go in the direction that they necessarily want it to. And I think that to some people is enough to get them to shut down long enough that they kind of run out of time to do what they want to.
Right. And you're very right on all of that. And when we look more deeply into that, it's interesting how people will violate their values, what they value in life, so that they can satisfy their primary needs, primary behavioral needs. And this is something that I got from the great thought leader and human strategist, Tony Robbins. Everybody, sees him as a motivational speaker, and he's much more than that. He's a thought leader and a human strategist. What he typically does, he says, look, success leaves clues. And so I just look at the best successes in the world and figure out how they got it done. And so what's interesting is that he talks about 6 human needs. And those needs are certainty, variety, love, connection, significance, growth, and contribution. And the first four, the primary ones, the certainty, variety, love, and connection, and significance are really key. And so these needs are very important for us. We have this need for significance, that, we mean something. We have this need for love and connection. We have this need for certainty. And so one of our biggest fears is loss of love, rejection, failure as well. And so what's happening then is that we'll give up things that we know that are really important for us so that we can stay in that comfort zone, so that we're not rejected. I mean, how often, and you don't have to answer this because I'm not going to put you on the spot for this, but your success and your hard work and your achievements, I'm sure has caused some disconnect with maybe some of your friends, and based out of envy or jealousy or whatever, because they've lost that connection with you. They've lost that significance with you. And so that can be a problem for some people. As we grow, as we become more, then the people who are left behind, we lose that connection with them. And so sometimes that's a difficult thing. And many people will just settle for less. They'll just decide, you know what, I'm not going to risk it. I'm not going to risk being alone. I'm not going to risk being ostracized by the rest of the world because I think differently and I'm going to be successful. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, until one day you just decide, enough. I'm not worried about, the rejection or the failure. And that's really all about, stepping in your personal power. And that's what's great about this whole world of personal development, is you get the opportunity to step into your own personal power. It's that 10x or 20x, depending who you talk to, within you, that there's so much more inside of you. And it's just a matter of going out there and finding it. Having the courage to dare and learn by yourself, or just finding that coach or that person. And again, it's interesting how people are so critical about life coaching. And the truth is, just like with any kind of field out there, I mean, there's a lot of great coaches and then a lot of bad ones. And but the people who are willing to look at themselves and take responsibility, accountability for who they are usually the ones that are so critical about life coaching. I can't tell you how often I would talk to my patients who are in relationships and would ask them, wouldn't it be nice to have a better relationship? Oh, my relationship is great. And 2 years later, they're divorced. But the point is that so many people are just really frightened, to make any kinds of changes. And so, and again, I think it's important for all of us really to appreciate the fact that, our brain makes 3 decisions or asks 3 questions. What is it that I focus on? What does it mean? And what am I going to do? And so depending on what we focus on, depending on what we've learned, what that conversation that's in our unconscious brain telling us what to focus on, and making that mean something, and then taking that action of whether to proceed with our dream or not. And so I tell people, if you're happy with where you are in your life, if you're totally fulfilled, or as Tony puts it, if you're really successful but have no fulfillment, that's failure. So what's missing in your life? What are the dreams that you gave up at some point in your life and decided, I'll do it some other day. I'll do everything first. I'll be successful first, and then I'll follow my dreams. Louise Hayes really puts it really well. And whilst many people say, I'm going to do it first so that I can have it, and then I can be happy. And she reverses all of that. It's be, do, and then have. Be the person that you want to be so you can do the things that you want and so that you can have everything. And so if I were to ask you, Sedona, what's your strategy right now to going after what it is that you want in your life?
Right now, pretty much my strategy for the last couple of years has been never say no to an opportunity that is sound. If not, I should rephrase that. You should take opportunities that you know you can learn from. But I mean, that doesn't mean do anything unsafe. But definitely work-wise, I have not turned down any opportunity, and I have not regretted it for a second. I definitely am one of those people that is very honest about my qualifications and will work really hard in a job. And I have learned that it only leads you to more and more stuff.
Awesome. So the question then always is, what is it that you really want? And how often do we give ourselves that time just to reflect on what's important for us? And do you ever stop, for like an hour or 2 hours and contemplate or meditate the things that you may want to do in life and or that you think is missing in your life? Or do you ever take the time just to meditate and just see what happens?
I've never meditated just for the sake of meditating. I don't do it very often, but there are some times where sort of a little bit accidentally I fall into conversations that make me reflect on things. And that's kind of been a really good experience in college, that there's a lot of like-minded people that you can go and talk to, and there's always somebody to learn from and different friends that you can kind of go talk to about things. But most of the time when I think about it, I don't really find anything. The biggest thing that I find is that I spend a lot of time worrying for no reason about things that don't necessarily matter. And that's something that I've been trying to fix. I think it definitely has a negative effect on my health. And I have never really been able to figure out exactly what worries me so much, but I've definitely gotten a little bit better about it over the years, and definitely put myself around people that don't, or that do help me with that, and they don't make me feel like I need to be worried so much.
I think Mark Twain, and I'm going to mess it totally up, but he says something, every day I die 1,000 deaths of all these horrific events that might happen, of which none of them do. And it's so true how often we are also wired to find out what's wrong around us and how we can fail. And again, I think that's part of the challenge that some of us have. And I used to have that challenge as well. I used to worry about everything. And interesting enough, my approach and my strategy in medicine is to see what's wrong first. And that serves me as a surgeon to make sure that I mitigate any challenges that might show up in advance so that everything goes smoothly, rather than just thinking, oh, everything's going to be fine and then end up having all sorts of issues. And so that has always helped me. But the interesting thing is that, if we look at ourselves and find and evaluate, what is it that got us to where we are today? Oftentimes, what people will do, they'll say, okay, great, all these great attributes and qualities, even the negative ones, like the ones you just shared, made me this successful, and we think that it's going to help us in our success in the future. And I think the key point that we always have to realize is that whatever worked in the past is not a guarantee that it's going to work in the future, and whatever didn't work in the past isn't a guarantee that it's not going to work in the future. But that's part of your evolution and my evolution into, flipping over the negative into the positive, and whatever experience that is. And some people have a tremendous talent to be able to do that, to really transform or transmute that negative energy into a positive thing. And what will be fun for you then, as it was for me, is to really appreciate, okay, what was it really that my brain was trying to wrap itself around this concept that, I was doing all these things. And, for me, and this may be beneficial for you, and I'm just going to talk more in concepts, is that I was doing things intuitively in a way, but gave it a meaning that wasn't true to justify and validate what it was that I was doing, if that makes sense. Because our brains need to create meaning about everything. And when we don't understand something in particular, why we do a certain thing, then, and I'll give you my example. I like to do things for people, period. And it lifts my heart. That's my emotional currency. It's just a lot of fun for me to see people happy. I create change. My passion about creating change, enhancing life, and developing peaceful awareness, as I like to put it. And so for years and years and years, I thought to myself, well, I'm helping all these people only to get recognized and have validation for my identity. And I thought that's what I was doing. And it didn't feel right. And I felt bad about it. It's like, I'm doing these things just so that people will like me. And until one day I realized, well, no, I want people to like me, but I'm not doing these things to be liked. It's because I like doing them. And so you may find some truth in yourself as to, what is all this, what's the positive intent of this activity that you're doing? And my understanding from the world of neuro-linguistic programming is that all action is motivated by positive intent. So whatever it is that you're doing has a really positive reason. You just might be giving it a meaning that doesn't serve you. And I think that's critical in giving up our dreams again as well. I think way too often, we're told, you have to follow this certain path. You have to do things a certain way to be anyone, to be loved, to be significant. And then you end up, just letting go of your dreams. And I was shocked when I heard an inauguration speech by some, I think some celebrity, whether it was in sports or Hollywood, who basically said, forget about your big dreams. Don't even dream big, because you'll never get there. And just go with the little dreams. And I think to myself, that's not a great message. I mean, whatever dream you have, go for it, because that's the excitement and the passion of life. Even if you do fail, failure is scary. For me, certainly in the medical field, it was scary because as a physician, you can't fail. And so I allowed myself to believe that's what was running my show and why I wasn't doing certain things, because I didn't want to fail, because I decided, well, as a physician, I can't fail. So I can't do anything else outside of being a doctor, so I can't fail either, right? Until I was like in my early 40s when I decided to become an entrepreneur, and I'm still working on it, by the way. I haven't really developed that business quite yet. I failed a couple of times, but I was happy to fail. I was okay to fail, and again, I think it's important for all of us to really begin and to accept that we are humans, that we have this human experience, that we can be wrong, that we are flawed. And if we want to be happy in our lives, we just simply have to start resolving, whatever it is that's making us unhappy. That we have to communicate with ourselves and other people, what's really going on, particularly in relationships. The worst thing that can happen in relationships is that you don't communicate. You don't communicate what's going on inside of you, Right, wrong, or different, it doesn't matter. It's part of that growing aspect of us. But most importantly, communicate and accept and acknowledge within yourself that, hey, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm scared, and then doing something about it. And I think so many people just stop, with that, and they just accept the status quo, and that's what life is going to be. And so you've got a whole lifetime ahead of you, and fortunately for you, and I like what you said earlier on, and not to put down the millennials, but it's sort of like the Generation Z is really picking up where the millennials left off. You grew up, you were born in technology, and you'll adopt and implement technology in a way that we never thought was possible. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think that, unfortunately for them a little bit, that um, millennials kind of started this um, kick with technology, and um, unfortunately got a really bad rap for it. And maybe that was just something that was a little bit unfortunate for their time. But I feel I feel now that there's people, it's always hard when you are the people who start to change the world. But then once it happens and once time passes and people grow up in that world, then it turns into a really great thing. And so I think that um, it's kind of up to millennials and the new generations coming in that we really spin that in a positive way and just make sure that we're always looking out for our future generations. I think people have to be a little bit more understanding that, and I'm very guilty of this too, but like once you once you grow up in a way different environment, things are just not ever going to be the same again. And so we can't just keep putting down every new idea that comes out. Some of them might fail, but that's the course of life. It's not up to somebody to make it fail or make it successful. That's just marketplace of ideas. It's either going to work or it doesn't.
Yeah, I think the one of the challenges that there's so much fear around change, and people just like that status quo, and they're comfortable there. And like one of my mentors, Steve Linder from Strategic Brain, says, comfort is like crack. We want it so much, but it's the worst thing that we can have in life because
Yeah.
it's not progress. And we're happiest when we grow. We're happiest when we expand. And I just think of the story of Will Smith. It's all over YouTube, where he talks about, he took on a bet that he didn't think was going to happen, and he was going to have to jump out of a perfectly safe airplane, and how he was so fearful of that to the very moment that he was ready to step out of the airplane, and then jumped out, and it was the best thing he did in his life. And overcoming that, comfort, the quality of life begins outside of that comfort zone, getting out of that comfort zone and really experiencing life to the fullest. Now, I'm not going to jump out of an airplane, and I'm not going to do any parachute jumping or anything like that because I just don't have a desire to. But there are other things that I would do. And I think that's the big issue for so many people, is that they just hold themselves back, and it's that fear of change. And I'm always so impressed when I get a client that's in their 70s or 80s, who wants to be coached, who still is eager to change, who's still eager to learn and to expand. And you have people in their 20s that said, I'm done, I'm not going to do anything else. This is my lot in life. And I think what's exciting for us as humanity, if you will, is that opportunity that's out there with so many new thought leaders in the world of personal development and life coaches, if you will, who are looking at the world around them and saying, look, life can be better and we can do these things and we can help each other. Rather than relying on these social constructs, which we call governments, and again, this is not a political platform, that are supposed to be our caretakers. And that's probably the worst thing that can happen to any of us. We lose our independence and we lose that joy of life, if you will, if somebody else is going to determine the quality of our life. And so helping people with their personal development, with their personal evolution, and giving people the tools and the resources to expand. Because as technology develops, it's interesting, and I forecasted this 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's going to be a problem. A lot of people will be out of their typical jobs. Technology's taken over, robots are taking over, things like that. And so people will have a lot more free time. But interesting enough, if you realize the potential of the internet, I think more millionaires are created today probably because of the internet. And you have somebody in the middle of Africa with a cell phone, and he's got his own business. And so the opportunities are there. Technology is so freaking awesome that it makes their lives so much better. And my own excuse sometimes of my own personal failures is that my mind is what I call multidimensional. People might think it's ADD, but it's not. I'm very structured in my ADD, so I call it multidimensional. And but I need the resources, and I just discovered a new resource called OneNote, which is absolutely brilliant. I wish I'd done this 5 years ago, because it absolutely captures everything that I need in an instant. And it's perfect for me. And I just discovered this the other day. And so now I have no excuses not to continue with all my ideas. But that's what technology does. It gives us the resources that we can do so much more. And interesting enough, one thing that I've learned over the years is that the best thing we can do with our own children or with anybody that we're in a relationship with is really understand their model of the world. And my oldest son, who's a nerdy guy and all into computers and programming, and I have a hard time connecting with him, and I have a hard time connecting with him because he's in that world that I just simply can't comprehend. And he's talking about coding and Fortran, and it's like, okay, well, that's way above my pay grade. And so it was cute because the other day, I'll say this, is that when I was a junior resident in surgery, I was there within my second or third month. That's when what the laparoscopic surgery was coming out, where you could use, scopes and cameras to take out gallbladders and appendixes and all that. And it was like a duck going into water for me, because my very first, venture in this, and it was an uncomplicated case. I was able to do it in 23 minutes. And that was the first time that I had ever done it. And whereas today, I think the average time for an expert surgeon is still in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 minutes. So I was very good at that part. And so I've been critical of my son because he's gaming all the time and he's programming all the time, and I'm not understanding the games he's talking about. And it's like, oh yeah, you're World of Warcraft again, or whatever it is. And so he calls me up and says, hey, Dad, hey, I got an idea for Christmas, and I'm happy to have you share it with Mom. And I said, no, I'll get it for you. And it was the virtual reality system, the Oculus Rift. I thought, okay, I'm probably messing up his education now, because now he's got more reasons not to study. And so I had some misgivings about it. So the other day he comes by my house, and in the past I never wanted to play games with him because he would always beat me. And me being very competitive, I can't stand that. I can't stand losing. Right, especially against my kids. I mean, they're all adults now, and so it's even more difficult. And so finally, for the first time, I think I can be better than him at virtual reality, because again, it was like duck in water, and I tried this thing out the other day, and it was just a lot of fun. And I just love technology. And I think technology is a solution for us for so many different things that it's mind blowing. And so it's up to all of us, to implement technology because the quality of life can be so much better. But there's a danger too, because again, I think the danger is that we all have living in one emotion or another at any given moment, and so our happiness has to do a lot with what our emotions are. And if you think about it, your achievements, deliver allow you to experience a certain kind of emotion at any given time. And so these distractions, like the games, can often be a problem because they deliver a very temporary and transient type of satisfaction that really fundamentally doesn't change your life. And that's a big danger with technology today. I mean, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I kind of can relate to that as well. I know some of my friends and my brothers have gotten really into like coding and games and stuff. And one thing that my parents did was um, and I always kind of liked this about my dad was he always wanted to kind of learn and a little bit try really hard to understand what it was that we wanted to do. And even if he like knew nothing about it, he still talked to us a lot about it. And he bought all of us those Raspberry Pi programming computers. They're like starter kits for coding. And I think um, one thing that he's always been really good at is he reads a lot. And so he's always like looking for things that would help us. He's always sending us like texts or emails with articles of things that he thinks would benefit whatever we're trying to do. And so that's one thing that I really admire about technology, that there's so many resources out there that people can find. But I do think lately, especially being a journalist, there are some things with technology that are a little bit frightening. I think there's learning so much about one thing kind of teaches you that there's ways to stop information from getting around. And I think that's kind of a real danger that the world could be facing. And
Yeah,
also
and
not accurate information.
right. I think you're absolutely right. And I think, with all the changes that are happening with the net neutrality and everything else, it's going to be a bit of a problem. Um, because now, finally, getting access to technology and information is something that's so critical for us today with our own personal evolution. But I think too the challenge too is with the type of technology that's out there, it's easier to be even more disconnected than we were before. And as much as it has facilitated connection worldwide, globally, it's also allowed us to be even more disconnected and also without emotion. And so that disconnection from others causes us not to appreciate, what other people are experiencing, what other people are feeling. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that there's a lot of violence in the world today. As much as people are blaming, guns and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that's what it is. I think it's just that people are in so many ways disenfranchised and disconnected and emotionally immature, and we need to start developing technology and information technology that will help us, become better human beings. And there's nothing wrong with becoming a better human being. And so part of that has to do with, as you become better, then you can also follow those dreams that you developed at a very young age, that you developed in your childhood. And that's what this show is really all about today, is you deserve to follow your dreams, and you deserve to make them happen, and you deserve to try them, to fail them, and to make them work. And at least that you tried to get those dreams out there. Because again, as Tony Robbins says, success without fulfillment is failure. And as much as you didn't get perhaps those dreams, even if you tried, there's learning from that. There's an experience. At least you know that you've tried. And so I reach out to all people looking at 2018. Check in with your dreams. Make them happen. Get a plan. Get help. Get support. Get resourcefulness. Find a coach. Or look at people like Sedona and see what she does and model her success. And so I want to thank you, and I wish everyone a prosperous 2018. I thank everyone for being part of my show this year, and looking forward to some awesomeness and expansion in the next year. So Sedona, once again, thank you, and
Thank
God bless
you.
everyone.
Thanks for listening to Dr. Rademaker's Prescription for Transformation. Join Dr. Bart Rademaker live right here on Radio Star Worldwide each week, or on demand 24/7.